This is Season 3, Episode 12 of Mastering the RPG, a tabletop RPG podcast all about upping your game. Doesn't matter if you're a game master or player, you'll find advice, ideas, and some strong opinions. Tonight's episode is Being a Professional GM, where you get what you pay for. Hey everyone, welcome to Mastering the RPG. Like I said, a tabletop RPG podcast. We got ideas, we got cool stuff found, we got strong opinions. We like to just talk about cool stuff. I'm Carl with my co-hosts Eric and James. You can find all our information about the show at masteringtherpg.com. Send us email with feedback or questions at gamemaster@masteringtherpg.com. So, gentlemen, it is good to see you, hear you, all that good stuff. How are you doing this fine day? How are you doing, Eric?
Well, I critically failed my crafting roll last night and burned my hand pretty badly, so that was fun. And haven't been able to use the computer hardly at all day, so yeah, that's what I've been struggling with. But otherwise, you know, pretty good, I guess. Weather's clearing up. Games still kind of missed. One of my games is kind of petering out, which is sad. So yeah, no, I'm definitely looking to get back into. I did a couple of one shots, over the last couple of months. So definitely want to try to do a campaign, which would be cool. But yeah, anyways, James, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm busy, doing lots and lots of games. I've got 5 games this week. Had an outstanding session last night with a mini boss in a Rime of the Frost Maiden game, which was so close to a TPK, it was out of control. Bizarrely, we had between 5 players, they had 2 hit points left between them, and then one guy hadn't been touched at all, had zero damage. So it was kind of this weird kind of game where everyone was on their last legs. But games keep getting busier and keep getting more and more. And so I have a bit of an announcement this week that I guess I probably need to let everyone know. I've spoken to you guys, but alas, this is going to be my last season of Mastering the RPG. I will be departing the show after our finale episode next episode. And so I thought I should probably say adieu, that I'll be finishing up here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, this is going to be super bummer. I've gained so much insight from just talking to you for my own personal gain. So it'll be a disappointment. I'm sure a lot of the folks listening will be disappointed as well. You will be missed, but I'm glad we get you for one more episode after this one. So that'll be nice. And we'll get some more.
And
of
I'm
your
disappointed
wisdom tonight.
too. I must say that the time zone between Australia and the US has made this particularly weird. So I'm not necessarily missing saying good night, everyone, at about 11 o'clock in the morning. But apart from that, yeah, look, I'm going to miss you guys as well. These conversations have been so much fun. They've been really, really great, and been really wonderful to deep delve into what we do and why we love it so much. So I do need to thank you and thank everyone. But we'll do a bit more about this next week. This isn't my last one. This is my second to last one.
What they call that, penultimate. So,
Penultimate. Yeah, that's right.
So I don't even know what I'm doing is just not fun anymore now that you're going. So we did.
A dark pall has enveloped everything.
Yeah. So we're keep playing our game. The group went up against a bunch of golems to try to get into an elven city and just wasted them. Like they just tear through things. Like did get one good hit, but alas, it wasn't enough for those poor golems to keep people from invading the elven city, and so that's what the players are going to do next time. So, anyway,
we're archaeologists. It's for history. It's not not tomb robbing. It's for scientific and historical knowledge.
Except you want to sell what you find. Indy, it belongs in a museum.
But that's well. There's no non-for-profit museums in these cities, so what do It's a win-win kind of situation.
That's true. Everybody wins. So, all right. Well, so just next week we are doing our season finale for season 3, and wishing James goodbye. that episode, we will be answering some questions that we received from other folks, in passing or, just in our games, that sort of thing. And so if you wrote us an email recently, we'll talk about it next time. So we have not forgotten about you. And when we'll call that the season, and then Eric and I will go lick our wounds and try to figure out what we do next, how we continue this fun we're having, and we'll take it from there. So we'll just
press gang some other dungeon master that walks out of a bar, you just whack them on the head and drag them into the podcast.
Hey, I'm in the Bay Area, the Barbary Coast, so we have a long history of. Yeah.
I've got plenty of microphones, so if they have to be chained in my basement.
Servitude.
That's right.
Oh, God.
Oh, that's funny. So anyway, why don't we just get right to the main topic?
Mastering the RPG with Carl, Eric, and James. Yeah.
All right, everybody. This is the main topic, and what we're talking about tonight is all about being a professional GM, because we have one for a couple of episodes, and we always wanted to dig in, pick his brain on it, and so we will dig in and we will learn what it is all about it. So first thing though is, James, what is a professional GM? What makes you a pro?
I guess you make money out of it.
There you go.
To be quite in a very short thing, you can make some money out of selling your services as a professional games master. It's a relatively new phenomenon. Really, it's only probably been possible in the last 4 or 5 years. Made probably even more viable by the kind of predominance of Zoom and online technology. But as a professional GM, you can make some money. I wouldn't say you can make a lot of money. Unless you do the ultra productions. There is professional GMs, which are your Matt Mercers and your big producer guys, and then there's the little guys like kind of me and the average Joe that just run a few games a week for a bit of extra cash. So it's a spectrum between very large to charging some people to play a game for you, with you.
Do you do all your games online, or do you have IRL games too?
I used to do IRL games, but after COVID, I moved everything onto online. And to be fair, almost all my customers prefer online. Then that's probably why they come to me.
Mm. And do you think that someone could do this full time? Like if you really were a hustler and had big groups and besides like the big production, all that stuff.
I gave it a solid crack for a good year, where I was getting between 9 and 12 games in a week, and that was kind of viable, but not really sustainable. So, at the end of the day, if you're a professional games master, at the end of the day, what you are selling is your time, your ability to actually sit down at a table for 3 or 4 hours and run a game. And so, in my experience, it is very, very difficult in order to do it full time. You need to supplement your income with other spaces. Not to say that others might not be able to pull that off, and perhaps they do. I've just found over the past 5 years doing it, very, very difficult to do it full time.
Interesting. So obviously you probably played a lot of games as just a GM. How exactly do you fall into, or do you start being a professional GM? What was kind of that, what pushed you over the edge, and what was the impetus to make that happen?
So for me, it became just a demand on my services in that people were saying, hey, would you do this for us? And we're happy to pay you to do it. So when it first started, I guess there were a couple of things that had happened. I've been running games mastering games since I was a child. So it's been 20, 30 years of me doing it. When I first started, there was a couple of things that happened. I started a bit of a games club for my kids, and so neighbourhood kids had come over, and we just have run a session of role playing, and that got really fun until word went out, and suddenly there were 15 or 16 kids turning up at my house on a kind of Thursday, and so I had to kind of say no, but maybe we do it on a Tuesday, maybe we do it on a Wednesday, and so kids games started to form. And then the other way to do it was I started running games at cons in Australia. So I was running at Oz Comic Con and and packs and things like that, and just people experiencing little one shots were just asking me, "Do you have a card? Would you be interested in doing this? You know, we'd love to have you kind of host a game, one shots or a campaign." And so it kind of, as I was running games, people were starting to kind of queue up, if that makes sense. So that was a good indication that perhaps this could work. So I started to do like little games for cash, and then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, all of my kids' games suddenly were desperate to do things because we were in lockdown in our city, and they all wanted to do it online. So I had emails coming from everywhere saying, "Can we just move this online?" And once I'd done that, then that changed everything, because I was running games online and we're able to get clients in from the United States and the UK and other time zones, because you can run it and you don't need to have people come over to your house.
Wow. So just people, it was word of mouth kind of thing. People just
Absolutely
saw what you
Yeah.
were doing and loved what you were doing.
Yeah, that's right. And that's how I started. But this was really early, when I guess it wasn't as common. I think the idea of paid games masters has kind of evolved in very, very short period of time in the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's probably a lot easier to get into it now than it was pre-COVID. There's structures and things in place that let you do it. So websites like Start Playing Games that allow you to find a games master to run a game. I had to set my own website up, for example. So it makes it you know, kind of the barriers to entries are probably a little bit different now if you wanted to do it, if you wanted to get started.
Yeah. So did you do, besides setting up your own website, did you do any other type of like advertising or?
I did, yeah, I did, and kind of put together a whole Instagram, Twitter, Facebook kind of online advertising model that got me a level of clients, and particularly got me some ongoing games in other countries that I wouldn't have been able to reach locally. By and large, though, the majority of my players are still word of mouth players. So I might have met them online, but they've then told other friends online, and so essentially it just becomes a word of mouth. And fair enough too, because honestly, it's a very personal thing running games for people. I mean, everyone knows this. You know, you're trying to run games for strangers is a very tricky thing. You want to be doing it with friends, and so there is that level of trust. Kind of whether you can do it, and that word of mouth is really, really important.
Interesting. So I'm going to flip a couple of questions, and I want to ask first. So why do people pay? Why, why do they come? Why do they put money out? I think I know why, but what is your take on it?
Honestly, I actually think the number one reason people pay for a games master is reliability. It's just knowing that on a Tuesday at 7 o'clock I can get on and I can play a role-playing game. And I can do it every week, or I can do it every fortnight. Like, you can book in and it's that schedule. I think having that professional service where you know that the person running it's going to turn up on time, it'll go for the exact length that you want it to go, and you can slot it into a busy life. I actually think that's the majority of why people pay. And then the other reasons are, not being able to find a group, or being relatively isolated, or the time zone could be different, having difficulty actually finding an in real life game. And then the last one for me is just the convenience, because it's online. It's, if you've just, I don't know, you had a little baby and you need a couple of hours in an afternoon, or it's after school, or it just for me, it was the convenience of it. And so they pay for that, in my mind, and my customers kind of enjoy that guaranteed game, really.
Do people come, and I know we've talked a lot, like you use audio as part of the game, you have a lot of tokens and maps and things that you've gathered for your different such. Does that play into it at all, that people come and they go, I'm going to get a more polished experience, or I'm going to get a grander experience? Obviously, you're not playing face to face.
I think so. I think so. And sorry, I probably didn't highlight that enough. It's actually, hopefully you're paying someone who's good at what they do. Yeah. So that they actually are polished. I personally pull out all the stops because it's an online experience. You don't have that engagement of being around a table. You don't have that kind of immediacy. So I do pay for the soundtracks, engage artists through Patreon and through commissioning art and things like that to make it the best that you could possibly kind of afford, really. So, I think that's important. I have seen other games masters who don't do that. They just offer a bare bones game, but their price might be according, and it is about that reliability. But I think the technology's there, the art's there, the talent's there. Why not use everything to give everyone the best game they can possibly have?
Well, what are some of the other, like, I don't know if it's strange or just like hidden expectations that you've been surprised by? Like, I know, because I absolutely agree with you. I think reliability is the number one thing, like, for sure. And people might expect like a very polished product, like you said, but there must be other expectations like, okay, we want to do a D&D, but we want to do it like this house rule and this house rule, like things like that. Like, are there any kind of like surprising expectations from customers that you've been surprised by?
Yeah, there is a lot of, I would like to use these rule sets, or I'd like to, effectively players wanting to do everything they possibly can because they're paid for the experience, and I find that it's still not, that still doesn't make for a great game. If everyone kind of does their own thing and wants to be, you still curate a game like you would normally for everyone else. And honestly, every now and then you might get a player that might be say, yeah, but I don't want to do that. I want to do this, 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 and this. And honestly, you like any other game, you have to manage the group to say, well, actually, this is how the group's going and move along. One thing that I found is because you offer a regular game, you can actually set up a very strict time frame, which is we will finish this campaign within 12 weeks or 14 weeks. You can actually set that expectation about how long that is. And that can often be a little bit tricky. So people might say, I'm really keen to play a Curse of Strahd, and often that, and I get requested to play that a lot because it's kind of an icon game. And when I say, yep, sure, that's 38 sessions, then that becomes a negotiation because ultimately it's people paying for the experience. And so one of the things that I learned pretty quickly is you get to the point. You don't tend to fluff around when you're games mastering, if that makes sense. You don't tend to have a day where people are just kicking around doing not much in town, doing a little bit of shopping. You don't tend to have those dead role-playing moments. You have to kind of cut to the quick really, really quickly. And I think that's an expectation, that you don't kind of waste time, if that makes sense. If people are feeling the story isn't progressing or the role-playing isn't progressing, I think that's probably the number one thing you just have to be conscious of, is that you're being paid for the time, I guess. The other expectations are in terms of the skill level that you bring. So I've had to do like a voice demonstration tape in the past to audition for my services, for example, because you need to kind of prove that you've got all of those chops if that's the kind of game that the client's looking for, if that makes sense.
For sure.
And I guess that's some of the expectations that players seem to have when they come in. But ultimately, know the rules, kind of be reliable and have some pretty pictures and good sound and know what you're doing.
And just real quick off of something you said, like, I know that you primarily do what I call adventure paths, right? Pre-written adventures, usually official ones. But you have toyed with your homebrew stuff. Are there people that come to you be like, we really want a homebrew game? Do you just like, well, I can't really do that because it's too much time? Or how do you deal with that part?
Yeah, and when I started, I homebrewed for probably my first 18 months. And I did attempt to kind of homebrew a world for the first couple of years. And ultimately, because of the amount of games that I was running, that just proved to be unsustainable. You just can't do that level of prep that you need to do. So I run only published adventures. And when I say published adventures, significantly altered published adventures, because some of these published adventures are quite flawed. So it's not exactly as written, but I muck around with them. Early in the piece, people were very keen to have homebrew worlds, and I think, what is it? Something like 70% of role playing happens in homebrew worlds. So that's the majority of the experience. It's just something that I wasn't able to offer, but I do know that the really popular kind of, some of the more expensive sessions offer that experience, but it was just too much. If you're running 7 or 8 games a week, too difficult to offer that kind of customizable experience.
So the kind of play off of, you're playing a lot of published adventures. You don't do homebrew much. So how's preparation? How do you prep? What is there a difference in prep between your just friends game versus the paid games?
I think so. I took a very different view in terms of a paid game in terms of structuring prep. So I treat it very much like a job, and so I allocate set amounts of time for each game, and I literally schedule it into my schedule so that I make sure that everything is prepped to the best possible degree, if that makes sense. I also limit the time duration of my games. So my sessions for children are 2 hours, and for adults are only 3 hours. Now, for a lot of people, role playing is a 4 hour plus experience. I make sure that I cut it down to 3. So I kind of treat it as a feature length film, where you kind of you prep one episode and prep it really, really well. I have had games, and this is one of those years where I'm running 4 sessions of the same game this year, and so you kind of prep it, but you still have to give that care and attention to each of the individual groups, just so that you remember, this guy killed the boss, that one negotiated with him, that one let him go. You've just got to make sure you don't get those wires crossed too much. So the preparation you still have to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, do you have any other, because that's, to me, was always the part of what you do, like the most, like, oh my God, I could never do that, or how does he do that, is like running the same module for different people. Like, how do you keep those lanes so well separated? I mean, it's just note-taking, like...
It's note-taking, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have to spend about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of each session taking really, really good notes, just so that I don't mess that up. There are great benefits in running the same session multiple times in a week, because your accent for the NPC gets better each session. So by that, you might sound terribly Scottish at the beginning, and by the end of it, you've got the Norwegian nuance you've been looking for. So so there is some benefits in doing multiple games, but it does take note taking. Having said that, each game for me is really memorable. Like, I remember characters, and I remember the adventure, and I remember the storyline, and I remember the dynamic. I don't think that changes no matter how many games you play. You still kind of get excited by the outcome of the session, if that makes sense.
Interesting. So we touched on it a little bit, but so what's the difference in how you run it? Now you execute it. How does that change being a paid game?
It's about that time factor. So are you talking about running a session or run the whole business, I guess? Running a session?
Yeah, running a session.
Yeah. So for me, it's all about that timeliness. So I have a lobby that people can enter in 15 minutes before the game. It's got beautiful Sirenscape music piping through it on the dot of the time where we start. I introduce, I recap, we do a bit of a check-in to make sure everyone's okay, and then straight into the session. So, and I don't take a break. So players can take a break, they can do what they need to do, but I just fire through all the way through to 3 hours, which you probably wouldn't do in terms of a friends game. And the other element so I treat it just like a kind of, like a performance, a kind of radio play, or kind of an ongoing performance where you off you go and you do it for 3 hours. I try and make sure that there is an encounter every week, because some players really love that, others don't, but I find that you need to kind of have your encounter, a bit of combat, a bit of role play, a bit of exploration in every single session, and then literally on the dot of the session close, we do a quick, we'll hold it there, and then position again for the next week. So very compartmentalised, and I make sure I've got time either side for note taking and doing all of those kind of things, if that makes sense.
So do you spend a lot of work? So we talked in a previous episode about timing and pacing, and trying to get through, like in a one shot, get through the adventure and the time allotted and what that means. So is that a big part, is making sure you get to the appropriate spot? Because in a home game, like the one we're playing right now with Eric and the team, we can kind of stop while they're shopping, and it's okay, because we'll pick it up next week, and then they'll go do something. right? So
So you do need to be conscious of time, because by the same token, you also want to end most sessions on a cliffhanger or something exciting. You know, you want something plot wise to kind of be exciting by the end of it. So you do pace it out in terms of trying to land it each week, but it's not as unforgiving as you might think. It's not kind of like a one shot. You will see a lot of these players the next week. One shots are different. One shot, you really have to land it when you're doing it professionally. You've got to smash it with 15 minutes to spare so everyone can talk about it at the end of it. So, you know, one shots, you've got to be very, very exacting. But for an ongoing campaign, there is some latitude, and there needs to be. This isn't kind of a script where we're reading it out. The players still have all the agency that you would have in a home game, and so you're never quite sure exactly how the session's going to plan out, and you're never quite sure about the curveball. And each of my groups, that even though they're running the same module, are in very different positions, and that's only after 3 or 4 sessions. So you know, the game still does take its turns. You don't script it and run it that tightly. It's not that big a difference, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I wonder if you talk a little bit. I imagine this question could even be its own episode, but I know you mostly do games for children or games for preteens or teens.
Yeah.
Like, what's the big kind of differences between running for like the kids and the adults, or child-proofing games, right? That must have been like a whole thing to kind of wrap your head around, or kind of switching your switch in your brain of like what's appropriate for this age or this age versus when you're an adult,
Yeah.
right? And yeah,
Kids games are very, very different. Well, they're different and they're not different. Particularly as kids get better at it and have been playing it for a lot longer. So I've got kids, for example, who have just turned 12, who have been playing games with me for 6 years. And not only have they been playing for 6 years, they've been playing 40 sessions a year. So these kids are coming into their 250th game session, which by the time we were 12, we weren't anywhere near that. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you know, you might play once every 2 or 3 weeks, not 3 sessions every 3 weeks. So one thing I've learned very, very quickly is these kids get damn good very quick. You know, they're learning because they're learning and going through it so much faster than what we ever did when we were playing, and their understanding of the rules is very, very different. You have to scale the violence back a bit, particularly young kids, but I've noticed that as my kids are getting older, I can bring that back a little bit. You have to pare back a story to be very, very, you know, bare-boned, and you just have to allow them to have the chaos that they will have. So a lot of what you do when you're managing professional games for kids is a lot of behaviour management as well. So making sure that everyone's paying attention and they're not yelling all over each other, and we're not rolling random dice on the screen every 5 minutes and all that kind of stuff. But that's just indications of when kids get distracted anyway. So it's always a bit fun. I find that they're more comedic. I crack more jokes, and I am generally sillier for kids' games, and it ends up being quite fun and quite funny. I generally, if in doubt, put on an outrageously silly accent and just see what happens for the next half an hour. It seems to work really, really well. But having said that, like, they're still like every other game. You know, we are finishing a published adventure in 40 sessions, so you have to think about the plotting and the planning and knowing that you're going to finish it in 80 hours.
So you'll do some editing on the modules themselves at times, like maybe to scale back the story or scale back some themes, or like I imagine Curse of Strahd, probably popular with a lot of the preteens too, right? And there's some darker elements in that. So
I won't play that for people under 15. So
interesting.
I find that you pare it back too much and it loses what it is. So
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So Curse of Strahd I don't touch. I don't run Call of Cthulhu for anyone under 16. There's those kinds of things that otherwise you've lost the essence of the game. And there's plenty of other really cool, spooky stuff in all sorts of other D&D. I think Curse of Strahd is one of those games that I don't want to mess with too much because it diminishes it.
Yep.
So do you mind if I'm going to shift gears a little bit and ask you more about the business side of it? We talked about the game side of it and all that kind of stuff. But let's talk about the business side a little bit about it. Is, you know, what's it, you know, what are your expenses? What does it take for you to do? And you know, how much money, if you don't mind, you know, how much money do you make at this endeavor? So,
and I'm talking Australian dollars here. So I can convert it to the US. I'll be brutally honest. It's about 20,000 US a year for running games, which is adding on to extra income. Is kind of it's an addition to my income, if that makes sense.
And
so you, like I
and
say,
that's
it's
7
very
games a
difficult
week?
to do.
And that's 7 games a week?
No, that's between 4 and 5 a week.
4 or 5? Okay.
Yeah. So it's when I was doing it 9 and 10, then we can triple that income. But I've scaled that right back now. So I don't consider it a living wage. I think it's something that you can do. There are benefits of doing it as a profession. Here in Australia, I get to claim anything associated with that business from my
I was
taxes.
going to say write-offs, just everything. Every dice that you have is a write-off.
So
right?
every dice, every token, every book, every miniature, so if you are, if you're an interested amateur that wants to kind of buy everything, well, this is a way you can kind of do it. But in terms of expenses for the business, once we set it up, it doesn't take as much as you think to run it. It's a couple of $100 for a website a year. It's a couple of $100 for tokens and soundtracks and things like that. So you can kind of run it for between $500 and $1,000 a year, everything included. So it's all about your time and whether you value it and what value you put on it. Really, after that, in terms of setting it up as a business, the game is only one element of it, and I think that's something that was a little bit of a shock, but I think it probably makes sense now. If I think about a 3-hour game, I'm probably will add an hour and a half to 2 hours of prep onto that, and then you have to remember your accounts and bookings and all that kind of stuff, and onboarding new players, and the emails between players, and all of those things that you have to kind of take into consideration. And then you've got your marketing to get it out there, and that could just be simple enough as an email saying, this term's games are up for booking, or it could be another email campaign. Because if you lose a player, you've got to advertise to replace those players. So I'm advertising at the moment for a couple of kids slots for a Thursday game and things like that. So it's a little bit more than just the time you're at the table. I think that's one of the things you should be aware of.
Is there anything out there that makes this easier for you as far as other than normal business things? Is there anything geared towards professional GMs to help with the marketing side or account management or that kind of stuff?
So the thing that has emerged since I started is Start Playing Games. So Start Playing Games is a website for professional games masters that you can list a game, and it provides a lot of links, and they've got their own Facebook page, and they've got a network of players that they can get through. I've never had any experience with it because I've never had to use it. But for me, had I had that 5 years ago, I think that would have made a big difference in terms of trying to build up marketing and try and build up those kinds of things. And that seems to be the channel that seems to be working the most. Having said that, I don't know what its strike rate is, and it generally works on a referral system. So for players that have already been in the system, or for games masters that have already been in that system for a while, will have a higher rating than people just starting out, if that makes sense. So it becomes quite competitive. If that makes sense. In terms of other things, I just run games over Zoom. I find it's more stable. That comes at a cost. I do run Discord servers for different groups to communicate between sessions. So there's other things that you can kind of take advantage of. And I use Fantasy Grounds as a virtual tabletop where the bulk of running the session is taken care of that way.
Okay, so we kind of covered the little bit of the business side of it. Is there anything else that you'd say to somebody kind of starting out from a business standpoint? Obviously, I think one of the big ones is run it like a business, treat it like a business, and not,
of course,
not a hobby you're making money on. Pay your taxes and stuff like that. So, is there anything else?
You have to do all of that stuff, and it's really, really important. And to be honest, it's part of the professionalism of running the whole thing and the reliability of it all too. My clients have a very safe, secure website that they can log in and pay however they want to pay, and they get invoiced, and everything is done above board. So I think that's really, really important to do. Sorry, I missed the second part of the question, Carl. I was just agreeing with you about running it as a business.
Well, that was really the point. Was
Yeah.
it's you gotta treat it as a business, and you got to pay your taxes. Is what I had said. The second thing is make sure you pay your taxes.
Yeah. I do imagine, though, there is something like if somebody was really wanted to get into this, there must be I mean, I think we'll talk about burnout in a second, but beyond that, like, you don't want to be almost, like, you do have to love it, right? Because if you're not bringing the same excitement you do to a home game to these people, they'll feel it. I mean,
Oh,
I have to-
absolutely.
and that's like that's such a part of it that you just can't fake, or you just can't like turn off, like, okay, business mode and like just keep it going. Like, you really have to be invested in each one. So I imagine that sometimes is a struggle for you, or I don't know if it is actually. Is that a struggle for you?
What I find really funny is there are very few, and I mean probably I could count them on one hand, of games that I actually genuinely didn't like.
Yeah.
The majority, I actually enjoy what I'm doing, and I might be dreading a session, thinking, "Oh God, I've got to do another session." But within about 20 minutes of being in it, I'm like, "This is great fun," and so you just kind of it perks you up, if that makes sense. But but it's not for everybody at all. To kind of be running role playing games for 10 to 20 hours to 30 hours a week. It's certainly not. You've got to maintain that energy level, and you've got to have a lot of love for it, for sure. Absolutely. Sorry, one thing I will say, Carl, for in terms of running a business, a little bit of a trap that I made too is I even though you can write everything on tax, trying not to kind of blow it and buy everything that's ever been printed about Dungeons and Dragons is a thing. You need to tape the lid on it. I've found that over the years, I've really focused in on exactly what you need to make a great session, the kind of sounds you need, the tokens you need, that kind of stuff, and I really ferret out the really good stuff and just kind of only use those great things, really. Find the best creators and do it that way.
Do you ever get pressure from your customers, clients, whatever you want to call them, to maybe like try new systems? I mean, I know you do D&D and Call of Cthulhu, but do you ever have people come in and be like, I really want to try this, like, this new Matt Mercer, Candle Obscura or something? Like, do you ever have that, people coming in saying they want you to run a one-shot and whatever?
Yes, from my Call of Cthulhu players. No, from my Dungeons and Dragons players. So the D&D guys are there for D&D, and they're there for published modules of D&D, and they want to get through them. For my Call of Cthulhu guys, they're like, let's try this. They're far more open to different games and different systems. Isn't that funny? It's kind of it's yeah.
And do you ever entertain that, or is it like you're like, I just don't have the time?
If I can, yeah. If I can, but. As I say, I'm running less one-shots than I used to. One-shots are fantastic to do professionally, but the problem is that by running one-shots, you're increasing your marketing that you have to do, because you're effectively re-recruiting for every single session that you do, which actually puts more time in the management of that session. So I find ongoing campaigns are just far easier just to roll out. I haven't run a professional one-shot in about 6 months for that reason.
Okay, so I think Eric touched on it. So you've got multiple campaigns. You're 20 to 30 hours a week. There's a lot of prep. Let's talk about the downside. It's a job. So are you burning out?
Yeah.
How do you keep the energy level up, and how do you keep from saying to hell with it and just walking away?
It is really tricky, and it's the big warning, isn't it? This a hobby that you love, if it becomes your profession, ceases to become a hobby. It's something that you actually do for money, and you have to bring it in. Burnout is a real thing, and so I make sure that I only run 10 weeks in a row. And then I take 2 weeks off every time. So I give myself actual whole breaks where I'm not running any games whatsoever, just to kind of recharge the batteries and kind of get through it. It's funny in terms of, if you think of a job where you might have meetings or you might have scheduled work that you do, scheduling it and making sure that it's in and you kind of can pick it up and let it go as you need to. Is like any job, you need to be able to kind of go, well, that was a terrible session. We'll have a cup of coffee and move on to the next thing. You kind of can't really dwell on things and let it bog you down. In terms of creative burnout, I think there is a trap of regurgitating or kind of just going through the motions. So you've got to constantly be kind of evaluating your performances, just to kind of make sure that you're still giving a great game. You know what I mean? You've got to kind of give yourself a bit of a review and a bit of a feedback after most sessions, just to check on a self-check to make sure you're still doing okay.
So there is that worry of, you've run the same campaigns multiple times. You've got the tokens already, the maps already. You've got, a lot of material. You get on the autopilot and you just kind of cruise through it. So
it's a risk. I wouldn't, you just need to be aware of not doing that to yourself. So you just kind of got to go, am I being stale? Am I just running this the same as I ran it yesterday? And so you tend to spice it up. You tend to put different twists on it. But the games and the players themselves will change the dynamic of the game massively. No two groups are even remotely the same, and they don't approach the same problem ever the same way twice. So that keeps it fun as well.
Well, so you touched on players. So I'm flipping the script a little bit here. So these people are paying you to play a game. Mm-hmm. How do you handle the problem players? Usually it's like, the adult conversation, and if it's just not the right fit, then how do you handle those players who are demanding or just don't fit in right or whatever?
And for me, you have to treat it exactly as you would in a home game. There is nothing that will kill a group faster than player dynamic malfunction, dysfunction. So if people aren't gelling with the group, if it's causing too much of an issue, if other players are being distracted, if it's just not working, it's just not working, and that works for professional and it works for amateur. I do totally reserve the right to say, actually, I don't think you're the best fit for this group. We can either find you a new group, or you might not just be a best fit for my games. And I've had to say that with players, and I think you still need to. Otherwise, you really run the risk of alienating the entire table and no fun for no one. For kids, it's a little bit more difficult. I've had to have a couple of difficult conversations with parents about kids' behaviour in the game and respect and things like that. And eventually they get the message. I will say that I've never had to boot a kid from my game yet. They tend to, I don't know, maybe they're just a bit more obedient. They go to school and they're used to being told what to do. But have never had to boot a kid, but I've booted plenty of adults. and I'm sure I will in the future too.
So have you gotten any backlash from that, like 1-star review kind of things, because of having to boot players who are problematic?
Yeah. Early in the piece, I did, and I think you just, after a while, you just have to wear that, and you've got to kind of accept that not every customer is going to be 100% happy. But these things are resolved pretty quickly. This is not, kind of 30 sessions in and suddenly we've got a problem. This is generally you try and resolve it within the first session or two, just you get a sense of when it's not going to work.
And how do you handle, this is maybe a little off topic a bit, but how do you handle player cancellations? I'm not sure of your average group size. Is it 4 or 5? I mean, what do you do if 1 or 2 people cancel? Like, is it talk with the group?
So for my kids' groups, I run group sizes of 6, and for adults, I run a group size of 5. And for me, the session continues if we have 3 players. So if the session continues and if I only have 2 players turn up and the others all cancel, I will refund the money of those 2 that turned up. And then we have a chat with everyone else about the expectation about turning up. But generally, and I mean, this is one of the pluses of running a professional game, right? Very, very, very few people cancel. Very few. I might have 1 cancellation a month. So the incentive of having paid for it means that people want their money's worth, and so they will turn up. And I also charge for blocks of weeks. So I charge for a 10-block week, which means a 10-week session. You know what I mean? I charge for 10 weeks. So in terms of it's not like they miss a payment or anything. They've already paid for it. If they don't turn up, they forfeit. So that was the only way I could do it. And when I first started and I was charging people weekly, and there was way more transactions and people cancel on me, and it just became really, really difficult. So upfront, and it's their money, so they turn up.
So that's a little bit of a tip right there from running the business.
Yeah, it's a good tip.
Is this the have them pay in chunks, have the burden of getting involved on the player now, because again, like you said, if it's $25 a week and they miss it, they're gonna I'm not gonna pay you the $25 this week or whatever it is. So that makes a lot of sense.
But they've paid the $250 and they will turn up. Yeah. But that's kind of, and that works really well for parents. Parents want to be able to pay for a chunk of time. They want to pay for the baseball season. Do you know what I mean? They want to pay for the Dungeons and Dragons season, so that works. And then you have that level of commitment.
Okay, very cool. So I think we touched a little bit on how you manage all these multiple campaigns. I don't know if there's anything more that you wanted to mention about it. I kind of blew by that a little bit.
No, I think we've done the multiple campaigns. Yeah.
Okay, so here's an interesting thing, and this came from other podcasts and other things that I've listened to. There's a little bit of controversy around, should people be professional? Should people have to pay for a game? It's a hobby, people. It's it's supposed to be fun, and it's going to ruin the fun. I've listened to a lot of where they're just like adamantly that this is just somehow the ruination of the hobby to do this. So, what do you think
it's really
of that?
funny. 5 years ago, when I'd post on Facebook, professional game charge, the comments would be flooded with "What the hell are you doing? This is mercenary. I'll never pay. I would never charge my friends. You should only play role-playing games with friends. Why on earth would you do this? You're going to ruin the game." It's been really interesting to see that change over the last 5 years, where now it's more prevalent, and it is a change. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure why people get so upset about it. To be honest, I look at it as same as a professional musician or a professional artist, or
you even brought
any
it up.
other
It's like Little League. Like some people do that as a hobby, and they are like the hobby. The hobby. I'm just spacing out completely. Coach, or there's people you charge them. I think that there's some gatekeeping there. I think there's a little bit of like people just don't like change, and with all these all our nerdy hobbies, right? There was a lot of gatekeeping as it got more and more popular, and I think tabletop games have really blown up, and I think that's just a byproduct of it for sure. Because I was always like, who cares? Like either you get game, who cares? Somebody wants to pay, let them pay. Like it's such a silly argument, but yeah, it was definitely there. I saw it too for sure.
And for me, it's been the main argument has been: do you have a game that you're playing at the moment? Yes, well then you're great. It's for people that just can't find a damn game.
Yeah.
If people live next door to their local neighbourhood game store and there was a D&D game on the time they wanted to play it, there wouldn't be professional games masters. It just wouldn't happen. But it is a very much a demand and very much a need, because people just want the regularity and just want the reliability. And they just want to play. And often if they can't, then they just want to have a game.
People pay for bowling, people pay for golf, people pay for skiing. You pay for your hobbies. Sometimes it costs
for sure.
money. Yep.
And like now, since it's blown up, since it's so popular. When I used to go on Roll20, now I don't really do that. But when I used to play on Roll20, and you're applying for games, there's so many more players than game masters, right? That's how it's always been, and that's only gotten worse in a lot of ways. So, it makes total sense. I have a completely oddball sideways question for you, and I think this has been coming up in a lot of different industries, especially in the media industry. But AI, right? And it's where it's at right now. It's not there right now, but technology is improving so quickly. Do you have any of that kind of fear? Do you see any of that? There's a lot of AI tools you can use as far as portraits and writing, but we're getting to the point of having an AI game master. Is that something that probably doesn't worry you specifically, but is that something that maybe is going to affect the profession of professional game masters?
I think it already affects the professions. I think those text-based AI programs, ChatGPT kind of vibe, already can kind of almost do it. It's very, very close. For me, I'm not sure. Until you can replicate a person, I still think still think a games master is the way we interact with these games. There is already an AI-driven way to role play, and that's Baldur's Gate 3. You know,
Yeah.
You've got the ability to interact. It's that instant adjudication of how people interact with each other. It's the humour. It's just the human interaction that I think is what makes our games great. I mean, it's what sets them apart from everything else. And I'm not overly concerned with AI challenging that, but very much it's a tool, and it's a tool that I'm coming to terms with at the moment. When AI art first came out, I used it a lot, and I've now dropped it entirely, just because you understand the morality of what's going on here, and people, plumbing the depths of others' creativity in order to prompt the AI. And so I hope that will be preserved, and I think that as a movement, that's kind of starting to bite. I'm seeing far less AI art than I did 6 months ago being advertised in products. So hopefully it's kind of a managed entity. I still cheat. I still give me a prayer of Grumsh in Orcish and spit one out for me.
I mean, I brought it up because there is, there's been with the whole post OGL and D&D Next or 6, whatever you want to call it, like about them wanting to do that, right? Them wanting to have these AI game masters to just kind of take up some of the slack. But I think, I do agree with you. I think there will always be people wanting the genuine experience of another person. I mean, that's what the hobby is ultimately about. But I think it might take us some of the slack, right? People still might go who just want like combat or whatever, but that's not what you do.
I just want to run a few encounters and off we go. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, and let's see what the big players do next year. The Dungeons and Dragons online virtual tabletop and how that might start to change. We'll see.
Yeah, that'll be it's an interesting direction the industry's taking all over. If you're a company and if somebody's not talking about AI inside, there's probably some worry that you're gonna get left behind. So.
Yeah, that's right. Totally.
So just to kind of wrap this up, we talked. You get benefits from having fun and everything, but what other things do you get out of it? We find besides I make money and that's great, but what do you take away from your experience doing this?
Being a games master hits a couple of buttons for me. It's a creative outlet, so I like anyone who's creative. If I play music as well, but if you're a musician, you want to play. I love running games, so it's kind of what I do. It's my creativity, which I think I really adore, and the groups and the friendships that you form, even though it's a paid interaction, are actually real. The groups of people that when you form a gaming group together and you meet each other for 80 hours in a year, you form those stories. You form all of those interactions that make home game of D&D or role playing so enjoyable, and so those benefits are still there, I think, and they shouldn't be underestimated. These are fun things that we do, so kind of creativity, that camaraderie, and the fact that they're fun, it still outweighs the financial benefit for me by a long way. So it's just fun to do, damn it.
Very cool. Yeah, I'd probably I'd play a lot more music if people paid me to play it too. So, all right. Any last thoughts or any last questions, Eric? Do you have? He's shaking his head no. So we'll go with thanks everyone for tuning in.
Gesture from radio.
Sorry. Hey, I critically failed my cooking. I did not get much sleep. I forgot we were not on video yet.
I hope this has been helpful. If someone wants to be a professional GM, shoot us an email. I'm happy to answer some questions next week.
Yes, that's a good idea. Send us some questions on email. Yeah, this is your last chance to pick James's brain before he leaves. So now's the time to send those questions in. And let's talk about, we hope you got something out of this. I'm sure you did. Drop by masteringtherpg.com to learn about what we're doing and send an email. See, look at how you guys just rolled right into that. To GameMaster@masteringtherpg.com. Again, that's GameMaster@masteringtherpg.com. and we would really love to have as many questions as possible to answer in our season finale next week. Season 3 over, and we bid James a goodbye. And so speaking of that, I'm Carl with Eric and James. Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.
Happy gaming.